Chosen one. Pause and breathe. What you are hearing now is not a coincidence. This moment is not random. It is divine. You did not stumble here by chance. Heaven orchestrated this encounter with flawless timing and sacred purpose. You have been feeling something you couldn't explain, haven't you? A strange tension in the air, a restlessness at night, a heaviness that comes and goes without cause. That wasn't your imagination, it was spiritual interference. You were sensing a war in the unseen, a war not around you, but over you. But here is the truth, heaven needs your soul to grasp you were never left unprotected. While shadows plotted your fall, angels were already standing at your gates. While darkness tried to whisper lies into your identity, divine messengers blocked its reach. The enemy tried to find you, but they couldn't. They were stopped, silenced, held back by forces greater than what you could see. If you feel something rising in you as you hear this, a trembling, a stirring, a sudden clarity that's not just emotion, that's confirmation. Your spirit is recognizing a truth it always knew. You are not just a viewer or a bystander. You are part of something eternal. You are a warrior, a watchman, a witness on heaven's wall. And what if I told you that everything that tried to break you this week was not an attack? It was a divine alert. What if the people who left weren't a loss, but protection? What if every delay wasn't denial, but detour? What if your loneliness was never rejection, but alignment? So you could hear the voice of God without static while you were mourning what left. Heaven was celebrating what never touched you. Don't dismiss this moment. Don't scroll past it. This is not just another message. This one carries oil. We must go deeper now, because what's unfolding next is not only spiritual, it's strategic. You were not simply born. You were deployed. From your very first breath, the spirit realm took notice, and war broke out. Not a war of swords, but of silence, of unseen resistance, of nights you cried and no one understood, of days you felt out of place in a world that never quite made room for your presence. Have you wondered why people are unsettled around you? Why you don't quite fit? Why the path is harder for you than it seems for others? The answer isn't found in circumstance, it's found in calling. It's spiritual. It's generational. It's cosmic. You were born carrying something ancient, something holy, and the darkness recognized it long before you did. You were marked not because of what you did, but because of what you carry. Even before you could speak your truth, your spirit declared it. Before your hands touched purpose, your presence prophesied it, and hell trembled. That's why storms came early. That's why you were rejected where you should have been received. That's why heartbreak found you in places that should have held you. Can you see it now? The warfare wasn't random. The isolation wasn't by accident. Like David in the fields, you were anointed before you were acknowledged. The oil knew your name before people did. And just like David, your calling drew conflict long before it drew honor. Your anointing is what awakened the war. The enemy saw the oil before anyone else did. This is why your battle feels older than you, because it is. Every time you stepped toward healing, heartbreak pushed back. Every time you reached for clarity, confusion came rushing in. Have you noticed how peace is always followed by pressure, how obedience doesn't exempt you from storms, it invites them? Even Jesus, right after heaven declared him beloved, was led straight into the wilderness. And so are you. Matthew chapter 4 reminds us affirmation does not cancel the attack, it magnifies it. The moment heaven declares who you are, hell intensifies its resistance. But let that be your revelation. Your battle is not a contradiction to your calling. It is confirmation of it. Darkness doesn't fight what it doesn't fear. It rises only when light begins to break through. Cardinal Wilfrid Napier once said that evil preaches tolerance until it is dominant. Then it tries to silence what is good. He wasn't just speaking about culture, he was pointing to the ancient rhythm of spiritual war. When truth begins to rise, distortion tightens its grip. When clarity appears, confusion screams louder. You aren't under attack because you're wrong. You're under attack because you're right on time. I think of Ezra, a young father from the Midwest, who began praying quietly over his home each night not because of fear, but because his spirit felt something out of place. There were no ghost stories, no dramatic events, just a holy instinct. What he didn't know was that his ordinary obedience was forming an extraordinary shield. Months later, his daughter spoke of dark dreams and shadows. He never saw the assignment against her, but heaven did, and heaven responded. He will never know the demon that never reached his family, but the angels do. What if the prayers you whisper in secret are building walls around your bloodline? What if the decisions no one sees are altering a future that hell tried to claim? There is an artist, Ketha Kollwitz, whose work carried the ache of war, the soundless grief of souls broken in silence. Her etchings were often misunderstood in her time, but they spoke for a generation that didn't have words, like her. You've been carrying a language too sacred for common interpretation, a burden too deep to be explained to those who live only on the surface. You feel things others don't. You perceive the shifts before they happen. You walk into rooms and sense things before anyone speaks. This isn't weakness. It's evidence. You are attuned to a frequency heaven speaks through. And sometimes that tuning feels like torment, but in truth, it's the mark of one set apart. Just like the butterfly that must be hidden in the chrysalis to become what it was designed to be. You too had to go silent, had to be sealed away. Not because you were being ignored, but because you were being transformed. Disturb a butterfly too soon and it dies incomplete. So too with you. The silence was sacred. The waiting was protection. What you called a delay was actually divine defense. Are you beginning to see it now? Isaiah 54:17 declares that no weapon formed against you shall prosper, and every tongue that rises in judgment shall be condemned. This isn't poetic comfort, it is legal authority in the courts of heaven. But that promise wasn't made to the passive. It was written for those who confront, those who endure attack, walk through fire, and come out without the smell of smoke. You have survived what others would have surrendered to. You kept walking through storms that would have drowned others. Do you understand what that says about your spirit? Why has your rest been stolen during seasons of breakthrough? Why do people shift toward you the moment you begin to move in clarity? Why are you called too much? Too intense, too sensitive because you are discerning what others can't yet perceive. Your ears are tuned to spiritual signals. Your heart is alive in dimensions they haven't yet touched. Theo, a quiet volunteer at a city food bank, never sought attention. But while no one knew, he was fasting and praying for every soul he served. One night, a woman came in ready to end her life, and all he said was, "You matter more than you think." He didn't know he was saving her. He didn't know angels moved through his voice that night, but heaven did. You don't have to see demons to know they've been trying. And you don't have to see angels to believe they've been fighting. The evidence is this: you're still here. And that survival is not passive, it's prophetic. You are proof that heaven is still active behind the veil. You've asked the question more times than you admit, not always out loud, but deep inside. Why me? Why this path? Why so much resistance every time I move toward peace? Why does every victory come with war? The answer is not punishment. It's proof. You are chosen, and chosen ones do not walk common roads. You weren't crafted for comfort, you were crafted for impact, and impact always draws opposition. From the moment you were marked by heaven, you were noticed by hell, and ever since, the enemy's strategy has been predictable: confuse your mind, cloud your worth, distort your view of God, and wear down your resolve. But what hell didn't count on was your resilience, your relentless belief in the light, your refusal to be silenced by darkness, your stubborn hope that refuses to quit. That's what makes you dangerous. That's what makes you holy. Have you ever felt like you were born for something more but couldn't explain why? Have you sensed a weight in your soul that others don't carry? Have you noticed how your presence shifts the room even before you speak? That's not ego. That's anointing. And it terrifies every unclean spirit that hoped you'd stay asleep, the same way God spoke to Jeremiah. He is speaking now. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. That was not just for Jeremiah. That word echoes into your very being. You are not late. You are not weak. You are not mistaken. You are chosen. You are rising. You are right on time. Before you even knew how to say your name, heaven had already whispered your assignment into the silence of eternity. You were consecrated in secret, marked in mystery, set apart in places no eye could see, and such a calling does not go unnoticed in the spirit realm. That kind of divine selection always draws fire. Some of you carry mantles of healing, others of teaching, building, restoring justice, setting captives free. You were not sent to decorate tables, you were born to flip them. You were not sent to blend in, you were anointed to open blind eyes, to disrupt systems, to confront darkness with light that cannot be ignored. And when you carry that kind of authority, resistance arrives early. It comes cloaked in self-doubt, hidden in delays, dressed as discouragement. The moment before you step into something sacred, the weight becomes unbearable. You felt it, that sudden heaviness right before breakthrough, that thick spiritual pressure that tries to make you retreat before you even move forward. That's not weakness, that's the evidence. The fight intensifies when you're close to crossing over. Your life, like Moses, is a testament to divine disruption. He was born into chaos, threatened before he could speak, raised by the very system meant to destroy his people, exiled before he ever fulfilled his purpose. But that's the pattern of the chosen. His life was warfare from birth, because his calling was designed to shake empires. And when the moment came, God didn't choose the polished. He chose the one shaped by fire, the one who knew the wilderness, the one who had been broken enough to hear clearly. Just like you, Jean Vanier once said that true strength is not found in perfection, but in wounds. And you know this, because you've been bleeding quietly while building faithfully. You've loved without applause. You've labored without recognition. And now, heaven is turning your wounds into wells, deep places of encounter, sacred spaces others will drink from, places where God will pour himself through. The pain wasn't pointless, it was preparation. There was a man named Jalen who spent years building a community center in a forgotten corner of the city. No cameras, no big donations, just consistent faithfulness. He showed up when no one else did. And then one day, a storm came. Emergency shelters collapsed, but his center stood. It became a refuge for hundreds, not because he planned to be a hero, but because he refused to quit. Sometimes, spiritual warfare is not about what you fight, it's about what you refuse to give up on. That is what makes you dangerous to darkness. You weren't just preserved, you were protected. that missed flight, that breakup, that unexplainable peace in a moment of chaos, those weren't coincidences. Those were angelic assignments. You've been surrounded since the beginning. While the enemy was mapping detours, heaven was writing deliverance. You are like the sequoia, surviving fire not by avoiding it, but by growing stronger because of it. Every flame that tried to consume you became the very fire that sealed your strength. Your scars are not shameful. They are sacred, proof of what tried but failed, evidence of what never reached you because it was blocked by divine hands. How many disasters did you walk away from with no natural explanation? How many times did clarity arrive in the exact moment confusion threatened to crush you? That was not luck. That was covering. That was covenant. That was chosenness. There have been battles fought over your life that you never saw. Wars in the spirit that never touched you because heaven blocked them before they reached you. Just because the blade didn't break the skin doesn't mean there wasn't a sword. Just because hell didn't gain access doesn't mean it didn't knock. You've been carried through fire you didn't feel, through dangers you never noticed, because angels stood on your behalf while you slept unaware. But here this protection is not the absence of testing. Job was upright, yet he was tested beyond comprehension. His pain was not a punishment, it was proof. His suffering wasn't evidence of sin, it was evidence of spiritual stature. And so it is with you. The increase of attacks isn't because you're failing, it's because you're rising. You've been noticed in the spirit, and hell has recalibrated accordingly. Have you seen how pressure escalates just before promise? How confusion comes right as clarity emerges, how people start to shift. How doors begin to close, how distractions multiply right at the edge of alignment. That is not accident, that is design. Delay is the enemy's favorite form of destruction. But you were not sent to be delayed. You were sent to dismantle. Temptation will not always come as darkness. It often looks like comfort, sounds like reason, feels like safety, but carries just enough truth to bury the lie beneath it. The enemy doesn't need to destroy you if he can simply convince you to stop. But hear me clearly, you are unstoppable. You were born for this time, formed in fire, raised in silence, carried by angels, sent to shake the very ground your feet now stand on. This is why discernment must become your compass, not your backup plan. Not everything that feels right is righteous. Not everything that shines is sacred. Remember, Delilah was never a threat to Samson's strength. She was a threat to his vision. His downfall wasn't physical. It was spiritual blindness disguised as affection. It wasn't her presence that broke him. It was his inability to recognize manipulation wrapped in desire. And just like Samson, you must learn again and again that pleasure can be a weapon when you lack discernment. Not every warm hand is safe. Not every soft voice is sent from heaven. Dr. Bernice King, daughter of Martin Luther King Jr., once said she continues to speak because silence will not protect us, and fear cannot be the foundation of a new future. That clarity didn't come from comfort, it was born in conviction. And that same kind of conviction is what must sustain you. Not applause, not validation, but fire-forged knowing that even when the crowd turns, the truth must remain. I once heard of a woman named Marielle, a quiet florist in a loud city. What people didn't know was that every bouquet she arranged was a prayer. She would ask God to send peace through the petals. One day, a man walked into her shop, eyes heavy, soul barely holding on. She handed him a bouquet, one she hadn't made for him, and said, "You are still needed here." He didn't buy the flowers, but he walked out alive. That moment wasn't a coincidence. That was strategy. That was the Spirit speaking through softness, what hell tried to bury in silence. Heaven used to save a life. So could it be that your gentle places, your quiet instincts, your small acts of obedience, that they are the stage for heaven's loudest victories? Could it be that while you're waiting for thunder, God is moving through your whispers? The oak tree does not survive by fighting the wind. It survives by bending into its roots, going deeper with every storm. The wind doesn't destroy it, it strengthens it. The shaking doesn't break it, it anchors it. You, too, are not being shaken to collapse. You are being shaken to root deeper. And those roots are not random, they reach into promises older than your pain. Ephesians 6:11 tells you to put on the full armor of God, not as decoration, but as necessity. Because once you begin to walk in alignment with your calling, once you start speaking what others stay silent about, once you step into the truth that has chased you through every storm, you become a direct threat to darkness. And the question becomes, what will you choose when doubt starts screaming louder than destiny? What voice will you believe when your emotions don't match your anointing? What direction will you follow when your spirit says, turn, but the world says, stay? These are not small moments. These are turning points with generational consequences. Because when you rise, you don't rise alone. Others are watching. Others are tethered to your breakthrough. The chains you shatter become someone else's doorway to freedom. You are not weak. You are not forgotten. You are not hidden. You are a spiritual warrior placed on a divine timeline. You are still surrounded. The fire isn't here to burn you, it's here to reveal you. The pressure is proof of the power you carry. You were born for this hour, assigned to this moment, and the darkness that tried to crush you will regret it ever reached for you. If something inside you is stirring, if your chest is tightening not from fear but from recognition, then don't ignore it. This is not just content, it's a call. Not just a message, it's a moment. This is your alignment. You've never been fighting alone. And if your soul is testifying right now, if your spirit knows this message is your confirmation, declare it in faith. Not as a trend, but as a sign. Because you are claiming, openly and prophetically, that you see the war. But more than that, you recognize the covering. You feel the pressure, but even more, you feel the promise. You are not defeated. You are defended. You are guarded by forces that move at the speed of prayer and the sound of God's whisper. Spiritual communication doesn't always come in fire or shaking skies. Sometimes it comes in the strange patterns, the well-timed delays, the instinct to turn left when everyone says right, the voice that says leave now before the collapse. Why did that door close just before the disaster? Why did peace fall on you when panic was in the air? Why did your soul go still just before you made the wrong decision? These are not quirks. These are not coincidences. This is heaven speaking, and now you're finally beginning to hear. Just like Elijah stood on the mountain, expecting God to speak in thunder, in wind, in fire. But God didn't speak in noise. He came in the still, small voice. That's where your guidance will be found now, not always in spectacle, but in stillness. And those who are truly chosen will know to listen. It didn't come through the wind. It didn't arrive in the fire. It came as a whisper. 1 Kings 19:12. Just like with Elijah, the voice of God in your life rarely shouts, it moves subtly, but unmistakably. It appears in the conversation you didn't know you needed, the one that shows up right before your breaking point. It appears in the numbers that repeat, just as you approach a decision. It surfaces in a dream that won't leave you, not because it entertained you, but because it warned you. Have you noticed it yet? the whisper behind the noise, the signs behind the seconds. There was a woman long ago, a midwife named Shifra in ancient Israel, who stood between death and life without a title, without applause. Pharaoh had commanded the death of the sons of her people, but she defied him in silence. She protected promise in its most fragile form. She resisted tyranny not through rage, but through quiet, sacred defiance. And she became an agent of divine preservation behind doors no one saw. You may not have a platform. You may not be known by name, but every time you follow the quiet pull of your spirit, every time you resist darkness when no one is watching, you're doing what she did. You're preserving futures that may never know your face, but will forever bear the imprint of your obedience. Is it possible that your alignment is shaping destinies beyond your own? That your yes in private is creating protection in the future for someone you may never meet? Years ago, Dr. Caroline Leaf, a neuroscientist, said, "The brain is wired for love, not fear." And though she spoke from science, heaven echoed through her words. You were not built to live beneath dread. You were never made to be mastered by anxiety. You were created to live under divine order, guided by the still small voice of eternity. So when your body reacts with fear but your spirit pulses with peace, listen. That isn't confusion. That's rewiring. That's heaven recalibrating you. Rowan, a man who worked alone in a mountain observatory, began seeing strange rhythmic pulses in the skylights that made no sense. No source, no scientific logic. And yet, every time he considered giving up, those lights matched his late wife's favorite numbers. No one could explain them. He couldn't prove them, but they preserved him. Sometimes, divine signs don't arrive to explain. They arrive to sustain, like glaciers that move so slowly they appear still. Yet beneath their silence, they carve valleys, shift rivers, and change landscapes forever. So too does divine protection. You don't see it when it's happening. You don't feel it while you're being rerouted. But later, you'll trace back the shift and realize it was always there. Quiet, certain, sovereign. Have you seen the numbers? Have you wondered why 444 stares back at you from clocks, from receipts, from license plates as if it's following you? That's not trivial. It's not random. Biblically, the number 4 represents divine completeness and sacred foundation. When you see 444, it's not luck, it's architecture. Heaven is building something around you that cannot collapse. It's angelic infrastructure holding your purpose in place. And 7 and 77, that's not superstition. That's sanctification. That's divine alignment. A seal from heaven, whispering, this path is holy. This step is watched. This journey is protected. So how many more signs will it take before you stop dismissing them as coincidence? How many more delays must save you before you start believing in the strategy of divine detours? How many more near misses, perfectly timed redirections, and strange inner warnings need to pass before you believe there's a hedge around your life that nothing in hell can override? The enemy doesn't need to destroy you. He just wants you distracted, numb, second-guessing what God has already confirmed. But chosen one, you were born spiritually sensitive for a reason. That intuition isn't weakness. That inner pause, that gut feeling, that unexplainable knowing, it's not paranoia, it's prophetic. Every time you choose alignment over anxiety, discernment over doubt, obedience over outcome, your sight sharpens, your sensitivity strengthens, you begin to perceive what others overlook, and that is your secret weapon. Heaven doesn't always speak in storms. It often speaks in patterns, in whispers, in numbers, in timings too precise to ignore. When you begin to see 111, 444, 777 over and over again in ordinary places, on digital clocks, receipts, signs on the street, it's not for aesthetics. It's not for superstition. It's synchronization. It's divine code. It's the language of angels telling you we are here. Keep going. You are aligned. You're not imagining it. You're awakening to it. You are protected. You are not imagining this. There is a covering over your life that cannot be explained by chance. But sometimes that protection speaks louder, more dramatically. Have you ever stood at the edge of what could have been catastrophe and watched it suddenly shift in your favor? A flat tire that delayed your travel only for you to discover later that the road ahead bore tragedy. A canceled meeting you didn't want to miss that ended up sparing you from a toxic entanglement. A change in plans that felt frustrating, disappointing until it revealed itself as life-saving. What if those weren't disruptions? But deliverance Peter was thrown into prison under Herod's rule, chained between two guards, watched by 16 soldiers. His execution was scheduled, but Acts 12 tells us that an angel of the Lord appeared in the night, broke his chains, and led him out past every gate, every soldier, every barrier. No one noticed until he was already free. Could it be that in the moments of greatest resistance, heaven had already stepped in before you even had time to panic? Not every rescue comes with thunder. Sometimes it comes with silence, a closed door, a severed tie, an unexplained quiet. And though it may sting, you must ask, was that connection ever lifting you, or was it silently pulling you down? Abraham was told, "Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you." Why such separation? Because elevation demands isolation. Not everyone can go where God is taking you, not because they're evil, but because their presence would distort your path. Some connections are not meant to be cursed but cleared. Have you been clinging to someone heaven already released? Bishop Fulton Sheen once said. Sometimes the only way the good Lord can get into some hearts is to break them. Not because God delights in pain, but because shattered hearts often see more clearly. Sometimes you must lose what numbed your soul to hear the whisper of your true identity again. There was a woman named Daria who had built her life around someone she believed was her destiny. 9 years together then. Without warning, he left. Everything unraveled. She lost her home, her job, her community. But in the ashes, she finally turned inward toward the voice she'd been silencing for years. She went back to school, launched a wellness practice, and now walks with thousands through their emotional healing. The breakup didn't destroy her. It revealed her. Could it be that your worst rejection is actually the beginning of your resurrection in the earth? Tectonic plates shift slowly, almost silently, for years. But eventually the pressure demands space, and what we call an earthquake is not destruction, it is restructuring. And that's what's happening in you. The shaking is not here to collapse you, it is here to realign you. You are being positioned, set, rooted for what's next. So what will you believe when those you love walk away without goodbye? When the job disappears overnight, when the community you trusted suddenly grows cold? Will you mourn what left or recognize that sometimes pain is permission? That sometimes the detour is design? That silence can be safety? Angels don't answer to emotion. They answer to assignment. They do not protect your comfort. They protect your calling. And they know things about people and places your heart isn't ready to see. So trust the exits, trust the endings, trust the stillness that follows the storm. You haven't been abandoned. You've been surrounded. Heaven hasn't forgotten you. It's been redirecting the path to preserve you. That no was sacred. That delay was protection. That separation, it saved your life. And one of the most powerful signs of divine protection is not what falls apart, but how your spirit stays intact while everything spins. Have you ever stood in the eye of chaos and felt peace you couldn't explain? Have you sat in waiting rooms, courtrooms, empty bedrooms, and yet something within whispered, "You are safe"? That peace is not denial. It's not wishful thinking. It is the echo of angels standing near, of God's presence quieting what your senses scream. Paul, in Acts 27, stood on a sinking ship in a hurricane. Fear swept over everyone, but Paul stood and declared, "An angel of the Lord appeared to me last night and said, 'Do not be afraid.'" How did Paul keep calm in a storm built to destroy him? Because he knew he was not alone in it. And neither are you. Peace in pressure is proof of presence. It is not the absence of danger. It is the assurance of divinely assigned covering. Have you ever wondered why, in your darkest moment, comfort came that made no sense? Why panic didn't take you when it should have? Why, in a lonely room, the air suddenly felt warmer, thicker, like someone unseen had stepped in? Do not dismiss those moments. Discern them. That was heaven breaking in. And yes, dreams are a sacred path of divine communication. Not all dreams are from God, but there are some that you wake from with tears, with fire in your chest, with a knowing you cannot explain, a message you can't shake, a warning, a calling, a vision too strange to be random and too real to forget. Don't reduce it to imagination. Don't downplay what your spirit remembers even after you wake. Have you ever dreamed of being rescued, of being warned before the danger came, of being led by a light, or visited by beings your words couldn't quite describe? Those weren't just dreams, they were visitations. They were heaven's signals delivered in the night. Sacred instructions embedded in images too vivid to forget. Joseph, the earthly father of Jesus, received 4 such dreams, each one perfectly timed, each one life-saving, dreams that told him where to go, when to flee, and when to return. Had he brushed them off as imagination, history would have unraveled differently. So now you must ask yourself, are there instructions hidden inside the dreams you've been writing off as meaningless? Are there blueprints buried in your sleep, dismissed as fragments, when in fact they were divine? Mother Teresa, the humanitarian, the voice of mercy, spoke often of silence. She admitted feeling abandoned by God for years, and yet, during her most desolate seasons, she recorded dreams so luminous they gave her strength to go on. In the silence of the heart, God speaks, she said. Her peace was not of this world. It was rooted in something deeper, something unseen. Sometimes, the most sacred testimonies aren't heard from stages, but whispered from janitor closets and hospital corridors. Elias, a man whose daughter survived a near-fatal accident, began walking hospital halls at night during his janitor shifts. He prayed over each room, not for recognition, but for mercy. One night, outside the ICU, he felt a wave of warmth wrap around him like a living current. The next morning, a nurse reported that a patient silent for weeks awoke during the exact moment Elias passed by. He said nothing, but heaven recorded everything. Some miracles never make headlines. Some happen in hallways, seen only by angels, and even nature understands this frequency. The northern lights, the aurora borealis, do not appear by demand. They only appear when certain energies align, when conditions above and below reach resonance. And so it is with divine presence. You don't summon it by striving. It breaks through when you are still, when you are present, when you are aligned. Have you ever prayed and felt a ripple of warmth through your chest? Have you sat in silence and noticed your arms tingling, as if heaven touched your skin? Have you stood in stillness and felt an embrace no human arms could offer? These are not tricks of emotion. They are evidence of the eternal. Angelic presence often feels like air thickening, not to suffocate, but to reassure. It's the kind of presence that stills storms without a word. So why do we second-guess what our spirit already knows? Why do we question our encounters while clinging so tightly to logic that never saved us? Why do we call the divine imagination, even as its echoes linger longer than anything else in our lives? What if the silence in your room tonight is not empty but filled with warriors? What if the next dream you ignore is actually a map? What if the warmth that visited your grief wasn't coincidence? But covering angels don't need credit. They don't need your applause. But they do need your awareness, dudes. They move quietly. They stand watch without fanfare. But every whisper, every reroute, every touch, every delay, they are counted. Nothing is wasted. You are not wandering, you are being watched over. What you call fragments, those unexplainable signs and gut feelings, are frequencies. And you, chosen one, are finally tuned in. The spirit doesn't only speak through fire. It speaks through feathers, through fur, through the choreography of the created world. Have you ever found a white feather at your feet during a season of loss? Have you noticed a bird appear and linger strangely near you when your heart was breaking? Have you seen the same animal cross your path again and again at moments too meaningful to call random? These are not accidents. They are messages. Spirit speaks in patterns for those with eyes to see. When Jesus was baptized, the heavens opened and the Spirit descended like a dove. Out of all the symbols, God could have used a lion, an eagle, fire, thunder. He chose a bird, gentle, silent, undeniable. And that same Spirit still hovers, still watches, still descends. So if a dove appears during your chaos, if a hawk soars overhead when you're under attack, if a butterfly lands on you in the moment you question your worth, ask yourself, is this heaven saying, I'm near even Balaam? On the road to fulfill an assignment that God had warned him not to take, was confronted by a messenger he could not see, but the donkey beneath him saw what Balaam could not, the angel with the sword bow. And when Balaam beat the animal, the donkey spoke, revealing what the prophet himself had been blind to. Sometimes the Spirit uses the most unexpected vessels to stop you from walking into destruction. Sometimes the interruption is the intervention. So the next time life slows you down, pauses you, redirects you in a way you didn't plan, don't just feel frustration. Feel for revelation. Don't just ask, why is this happening? Ask, what is this trying to protect me from? Because in this hour, every delay carries divine data. Every shift is strategic, and every pattern, every presence, every whisper, heaven is speaking through them all. Balaam's donkey saw what the prophet couldn't. The angel stood in the path with sword drawn, sent by heaven to block destruction, and it was the animal, not the man, who first discerned it. When Balaam struck the donkey in anger, it spoke not out of defiance, but from divine urgency. Only then were Balaam's eyes opened to the angel standing before him. Heaven had been protecting him all along, and creation saw it first. So ask yourself, could it be that the creature that paused and stared into your soul, the one that appeared at your door, The one that made you stop was more aware of your protection than you were. During a season of profound grief, actress and humanitarian Ashley Judd wandered alone through the Tennessee mountains. One day, a deer appeared just feet from her still, unblinking, unwavering. She later described it as a sacred visitation. She couldn't explain it, but she didn't need to. Some moments speak louder in silence. That deer wasn't decoration, it was a messenger of peace. Could it be that God uses stillness in creation to awaken stillness in you, Soren? A young chef in a coastal town canceled a dinner reservation last minute because of a feeling he couldn't shake. Driving home on the back roads, he saw a fox perched on a fence post, staring straight at him, unmoving. Later that night, the restaurant he was meant to dine in caught fire. He wasn't spared by accident. He was warned not by voice, but by gaze, a stillness that redirected his steps. Have there been moments like that in your life, moments so small at the time, yet, looking back, they rerouted everything? Even nature carries divine intelligence. Geese fly in perfect formation, taking turns bearing the wind, protecting each other in mid-air. When one falls, two others descend, refusing to leave it alone. That's not instinct, it's encoded compassion, built-in loyalty. Sacred design. Can you see it? The pattern of heaven, written into biology, stitched into the wild. So ask yourself, were there unseen companions, angelic or human, who stood beside you in your lowest hour? Even when you didn't know to ask, that quiet presence, that timely call, that stranger who sat near you without a word, was it coincidence? Or was it covenant? Your intuition is not just a gut feeling. It is a divine radar, calibrated to the spirit's frequency. Have you ever known something without explanation? Felt a no deep in your bones when everything looked like a yes? Chosen a different route for no reason, only to find out later what you avoided? That wasn't paranoia. That was protection. That was the voice behind you whispering, "This is the way. Walk in it." Isaiah 30:21. Even when you weren't listening, heaven was still speaking. Even when you were unsure, the path was still being lit. Angels don't just intervene, they instruct. But how often have you dismissed the divine because it came softly? How many warnings felt like vague hunches until hindsight revealed their holiness? How many creatures carried comfort into your chaos without a single word? What if that feather was not fluff, but a seal? What if that burst of warmth wasn't mood, but shield? What if that quiet tightening in your chest was the spirit saying, "Not this way"? The enemy wants you to feel alone. He wants you to believe the lie that no one is watching, no one is guiding, no one is standing for you. But look again. Heaven has been loud, you just weren't listening in the language the Spirit speaks. You were never walking alone. You never will. And if your spirit is burning right now, if any part of this feels like it was written directly into your blood, respond. Don't nod in silence. Declare it. Type 777 not as a trend, but as a spiritual signal. A bold announcement to the unseen. I see it. I receive it. I believe it. This is your agreement with heaven, your declaration that you are under divine protection, that you are surrounded by angelic forces, that the plans of the enemy will not prevail. You were shielded in moments you didn't even know were dangerous. You were rerouted when you were unknowingly heading toward traps. You were wrapped in peace when your world should have collapsed. Have you noticed the pattern yet? The strange string of coincidences that preserved your mind, your body, your very future. The signs are not hiding. The question is, are your spiritual eyes open? The deeper the calling, the heavier the warfare. And if you've been walking through fire lately, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, it is not punishment, it is announcement. You are marked, you are anointed, and hell knows it. That's why the pressure has felt personal. That's why the attacks have come in waves, targeted, strategic, not random. But hear me, you are not being broken, you are being built. David wasn't just attacked by Goliath. He was first overlooked by his family, dismissed by his brothers, mocked by soldiers, underestimated by a nation. Why? Because the enemy saw the oil before anyone else did. Within that shepherd boy lived a king. He was carrying a destiny too dangerous to be ignored. And so are you. What if the pain you've endured was never proof of your weakness, but revelation of your hidden power? What if your deepest wounds were actually the doorway through which your purpose was announced? When Jesus began his ministry, the enemy didn't wait. 40 days in the wilderness, starved, tempted, targeted, and yet he emerged, not broken, but clothed in authority, because spiritual resistance always confirms spiritual relevance. So if your trials have felt louder, your temptations more subtle but relentless, your emotions heavier for no reason, know this: the battle reveals the blueprint. Oprah once said, "Where there is no struggle, there is no strength." And she didn't just say it, she lived it. Abused, rejected, ridiculed, yet her voice became one of the most powerful on the planet. Her warfare wasn't a curse, it was a crown in disguise. Could it be that the intensity of your battles is directly tied to the influence you are destined to carry? Celine spent 10 years as a social worker in a city drowning in poverty and violence. Often, she stood on the edge of burnout, wondering if it mattered. But time and time again, just when she was ready to quit, someone would share how a single conversation with her had stopped them from suicide or helped them walk away from abuse. That's when she understood she wasn't just showing up. She was snatching souls from destruction. Isn't that what you've been doing? Even when you didn't realize it, like a river carving through stone. Not with force, but with persistence, years, even centuries, reshaping mountains not loudly but unrelentingly. You are that river, and though the enemy throws boulders, it cannot stop your flow when heaven is the source of your movement. Isaiah 54:17 declares, "No weapon formed against you shall prosper, and every tongue that rises against you in judgment, you shall condemn." It never said the weapons wouldn't form. It said they won't work. The enemy is allowed to launch, but heaven has already ruled the outcome. So why do you still question your strength? Why do you wonder if you matter, when darkness has been working overtime to silence you? Why do you doubt your significance? When your survival is already shouting your authority, you shrink. When the Spirit is trying to expand you, you retreat. When angels are surrounding you, you fear. While heaven has already gone before you, you are not a liability to the kingdom. You are a threat to darkness. That's why the pressure feels personal. That's why the attacks feel targeted. Because they are. But pressure doesn't mean punishment, it means purpose. You are not being hunted because you are weak. You are being hunted because you are chosen. And no matter how many arrows fly, you are covered, surrounded, sealed. The enemy's most effective tactic isn't always violent, it's familiar. He doesn't just roar. He whispers through voices you trust. Have you ever been blindsided by someone you loved? Noticed conversations shift, encouragement curdle into envy, subtle disrespect sneak in where love used to live? That's not accident, that's infiltration. The enemy moves through agreement, and when someone is unguarded, consumed by fear, pride, offense, They become access points for attacks designed to pierce your soul. That's why chosen ones don't just face resistance from strangers. They face betrayal from those closest to them. Even Jesus wasn't betrayed by a soldier, but by a friend. Judas walked with him, prayed beside him, witnessed miracles yet kissed him into captivity. The wound didn't come from a sword, it came from someone he fed. Could it be that the betrayal you faced wasn't personal? It was prophetic. Why did it hurt more than usual? Why did their words echo louder than others? Because betrayal from those you love is a weapon forged for your deepest places. But don't mistake the sting for defeat. Don't let pain steal your voice. You are not weak. You are a weapon. Another battlefield, maybe the most common, is your mind. Have you had days when despair rose up like smoke? Out of nowhere, moments where fear screamed louder than truth. Thoughts that didn't even sound like your own. Yet they clung to you like fog. That's not your imagination. That's invasion. The enemy plants lies hoping you'll water them with agreement. But you don't have to. Even the prophet Elijah, who called fire from heaven, who outran chariots, who stood before kings, crumbled under one threat from Jezebel. He ran to the wilderness and begged God to let him die. Why? Because even the mighty wrestle with mental exhaustion. Even the anointed feel undone by a single whisper. So if you've been tired with no cause, drained when you've done nothing wrong, if you sleep but don't feel rested, sit still but feel unrested, it might not be fatigue, it might be spiritual siege. Nelson Mandela, after 27 years in prison, said, "There were dark moments when my faith in humanity was sorely tested, but I would not and could not give myself up to despair." Because he understood what every chosen soul must. When you threaten oppressive systems, exhaustion will come. But surrender is not an option. Sophia, a trauma counselor in a violence-ridden school district, carried the weight of children's pain every day. One morning, she began waking in panic, for no reason, no dreams, no memories, just dread. That wasn't weakness, that was spiritual residue, the cost of standing in the gap. And yet, even in the weight, she kept showing up. Because chosen ones don't run from darkness, they carry light into it. She thought it was burnout, so she stepped away, assuming her strength had run dry. But in the stillness, clarity returned. It wasn't burnout, it was spiritual backlash. And when she came back, she didn't just return, she confronted. She began fasting. She anointed the walls of her office. She prayed before every session, and peace returned. The heaviness lifted, attacks ceased. Because sometimes fatigue is not physical, it's spiritual, and only when you treat it as war, not weakness, will you see the shift. In the wild, when a predator approaches a herd of gazelles, it never lunges at the strongest. It studies. It waits. It watches for the one lagging behind, the one limping. Distracted. Exhausted. That's who it isolates. That's who it devours. The enemy of your soul does the same. He waits until your rhythm breaks, your defense is lower, your mind is foggy, then he moves. Not to kill quickly, but to drain slowly. 2 Corinthians chapter 10:5 reminds us. We demolish every argument and pretension that sets itself against the knowledge of God, and we take every thought captive to make it obedient to Christ. You don't have to accept every thought that enters. You are not at the mercy of your mind. You are not powerless in the face of mental warfare. You are equipped with spiritual authority. So why do distractions always show up right when you begin praying with consistency? Why do temptations knock louder the moment your vision sharpens? Why do people from your past suddenly resurface just as your soul starts healing? Could it be that these aren't opportunities, But traps, could it be that some doors aren't divine, they're detours? Not every open door is from heaven. Not every smile is safe. Not every connection is covenant. The enemy's goal is not always to stop you. Sometimes it's to slow you, to charm you into complacency, to flatter you into compromise, to exhaust you into silence. But what he didn't plan for is your awakening. And for many chosen ones, the fiercest battles don't come by daylight, they come in dream. Have you felt it, the pressure on your chest at night? The frozen body while your spirit screams, the sense that something heavy and unseen is pressing into your room that is not just a dream, that is war. That is your soul entering a realm where the warfare turns invisible but real. The dream realm is spiritual territory, and when your anointing grows, so does the assault. Have you woken up exhausted after 8 hours of sleep? Have you had vivid dreams of fighting, fleeing, or binding forces you couldn't explain but couldn't forget? And have you noticed that some of these dreams come right after a spiritual breakthrough? It's not coincidence, it's confrontation. In the book of Daniel, the prophet received visions while sleeping, encounters so intense he fasted for days just to understand them. In Daniel 10, an angel tells him that the answer to his prayer had been delayed, not denied, by demonic resistance. For 21 days, the breakthrough existed, but it was being contended for in the spirit. Could it be that your nightmares are actually evidence that your spirit is touching realms most never reach? And still, the enemy doesn't stop with dreams. He tries to isolate you, to make you feel out of place, even among those who love you. Have you noticed your thoughts are deeper, your emotions sharper, your spirit heavier than those around you? That's not dysfunction. That's separation. That's calling. You were set apart, but the enemy wants to twist your uniqueness into loneliness. But understand this: loneliness is not the absence of people. It is the presence of calling. Elijah, after calling fire from heaven, ran into the wilderness, convinced he was alone. He cried out, "I alone am left," but God corrected him. There are 7,000 others who have not bowed. You are not as isolated as you think. You are enlisted. Singer and activist Lauryn Hill once said, "The real you is powerful. The illusion is weak." She didn't say that from a stage. She said that from a place of awakening. And maybe that's where you are right now, not unraveling, but awakening. What if your confusion isn't failure, it's a call to recalibrate? Camilla, a young business consultant, began dreaming of keys always being offered them. But when she reached, they'd vanish or turn to ash. At first, she ignored it. But then she noticed a pattern: the dreams always came before new clients tried to manipulate her. She began journaling, fasting before meetings, and what once felt like chaos became clarity. What once felt like random anxiety became discernment. Have your dreams been trying to teach you in nature? The octopus is a master of illusion. It can blend into coral, mimic other creatures, vanish in plain sight. Predators swim past it unaware, mere inches from danger. The enemy operates the same way. He doesn't always look dangerous. He adapts. He mimics. He disguises. This is why you must be vigilant in the spirit. This is why discernment is your armor. Because the higher your calling, the more subtle the deception. The more anointed you are, the more refined the opposition. But hear me when you see it. You can stop it when you name it. You can cast it out. When you discern it, you disarm it. The enemy doesn't always come cloaked in red horns and fire. Sometimes he wears charisma. Sometimes he mimics wisdom. Sometimes he dresses like light. And that is why discernment in this hour is not optional. It is vital. Have you ever encountered someone who seemed perfect on paper, but your spirit recoiled? Have you ever stepped into a room and felt a shift in the atmosphere that no one else could explain? Have you ever looked at something that should have felt like a blessing, but instead, your peace vanished? That's not paranoia. That's prophecy in motion. Those aren't mood swings. Those are spiritual warnings. The enemy doesn't need to destroy you if he can deceive you. 2 Corinthians 11:14 says it plainly. Even Satan masquerades as an angel of light. If he came draped in obvious evil, you'd never follow. So he imitates truth. He mimics beauty. He packages temptation as opportunity. That's why some of the most dangerous invitations come wrapped in open doors, attractive people, golden moments. So why do your dreams seem under attack the moment your faith increases? Why does your mind spiral after your most powerful prayers? Why do doors close right before your breakthrough? Why do people call your discernment paranoia? Why does your spirit ache in places logic can't reach? It's because you're not ordinary. You were never meant to be led by what looks good. You were designed to be led by what feels holy. The enemy wants to wear you out before the release arrives. But he's too late. You're already awakening. Stay rooted. Stay armored. Stay discerning. Because here's what hell doesn't want you to remember: they are loud but limited. They threaten, but they cannot conquer. They manipulate, but they cannot override what heaven has already sealed. Their only real weapon is your unknowing. But the moment you begin to see it, the moment you recognize the cycle, the emotional patterns, the manipulations, you start to dismantle their influence brick by brick. Can darkness shout into your mind? Yes. Can it try to twist your emotions? Absolutely. But can it overcome the light inside of you? Never. Not unless you hand it the keys. Not unless you agree with the lie. That's why the warfare feels so personal, because your awakening terrifies the enemy. Why did the attacks escalate when you finally chose healing? Why did confusion hit the moment you began to pray deeply? Why did distractions show up just as you aligned with purpose? Because your spirit is now visible in the spirit realm. And hell has noticed. Luke 10:19. I have given you authority to overcome all the power of the enemy. Nothing will harm you. That authority isn't passive. It's not just words. It's active. It's fire. Demons don't flee because you shout, they flee because you are aligned. The Apostle Paul spoke of a thorn in his flesh, a messenger of Satan that tormented him, 2 Corinthians 12:7. But God didn't remove the thorn. He gave Paul something deeper. My grace is sufficient. My power is made perfect in weakness. Sometimes the attack isn't removed because your endurance is a louder testimony than your escape ever could be. Viola Davis once said, "When you see me, you see what's possible." She was rejected, silenced, passed over, but her very presence now disrupts the system that once tried to erase her. And so it is with you. Your resistance is proof of your impact. If you didn't matter, the enemy wouldn't be fighting you this hard. Nia, a young woman who felt invisible most of her life, battled anxiety every time she stepped toward purpose. Friendships crumbled, projects failed. Until one night, after a breakdown, she cried out, "God, if I matter, show me." The next morning, a stranger sent her a voice note. "Your words changed my life last year." That message cracked something open. She hasn't looked back since. How many times has heaven answered your cries through the most unlikely mouths? Volcanoes lie silent for years, centuries. But beneath that stillness is pressure, heat, movement. And when they finally erupt, they reshape the landscape. You've been building quietly, enduring silently, but heaven has been adding pressure, and the eruption is near, not of destruction, but of destiny. So why do you still question your value? Why do you fear the shaking when it's the signal that release is near? Why do you think warfare means failure when it actually marks favor? Why do you beg God to remove the battle when He's using it to build your authority? Why do you shrink when you were born to lead? Why do you doubt when your survival is already proof of victory? Why do you look for signs when you are the sign? The battle was never a sign of abandonment. It was a sign of anointing. You are not being punished. You are being positioned. You are not being rejected. You are being revealed. You are being refined. What was meant to break you has only sharpened you. The battlefield that was supposed to bury you has become your training ground. So if this word has stirred your soul, if every line felt like it was written for your spirit, don't stay silent. Speak it. Declare it. Type 111 in the comments, not for performance, but as a prophetic act. Say it out loud. I am covered. I am chosen. I am rising. The attacks failed. The enemy has lost. This is your moment to cancel every lie spoken over your mind, to step boldly into divine authority, to silence every voice that ever said, "You're too broken, too late, too weak." You are none of those things. You are shielded. You are seen. You are standing on a battlefield already marked victory. The enemy cannot stop what God has ordained. And now that you know the truth, he cannot deceive you either. So stand firm, speak boldly, move forward, because you were never fighting alone. Chosen one. Not for one moment, not for a single breath have you walked this journey by yourself. Even in the midnight hours, when battle fatigue pressed against your chest, when confusion wrapped around your mind like fog, when betrayal left you bleeding in slants, there were warriors, not symbolic, not imagined, real, assigned, present. Have you ever stopped to ask, how did I survive that season? How did I make it through the storm that should have shattered me? Why did some people vanish without warning, only for their hidden motives to be exposed later? These were not coincidences. They were confirmations, proof that heaven has been guarding you in real time. Psalm 91:11 says, "He will command his angels concerning you, to guard you in all your ways." This is not poetic language, it's a divine dispatch order. Angels do not wait for you to cry out before they move. They are already there, reading the terrain, sensing the ambush, shifting your steps, shielding your path, the delay you resented. That wasn't punishment. It was protection. When the prophet Elisha was surrounded by an enemy army in 2 Kings 6, his servant panicked. But Elisha prayed, "Lord, open his eyes." And suddenly the servant saw at the hills ablaze with horses and chariots of fire. You too are surrounded. You just may not have seen it yet. Have you ever made a decision that didn't make sense on paper but brought deep peace? Have you suddenly felt uncomfortable in a space you once loved? Felt the urge to disconnect from someone you couldn't explain? That's not anxiety. That's angelic intelligence. Your angels know what your mind doesn't, and they act before you can. Jim Caviezel, during filming for The Passion of the Christ, was struck by lightning twice and endured serious injuries. Yet he survived, and later he described the unseen presence that surrounded him at his weakest. Protection doesn't mean absence of attack. It means the enemy never gets the final word. Malika started a new job under a charismatic supervisor, on paper perfect, but in her spirit, something was off. She created distance. Weeks later, that supervisor was exposed. Staying connected would have destroyed her. What felt like fear was actually angelic discernment. Have you been listening to those whispers or silencing them in nature? The meerkat posts one among them as a lookout, while the others feed, One watches vigilant, alert, and when danger approaches, it cries out. That's not paranoia. That's protection. So what if the sudden shift in your mood wasn't emotional instability, but a spiritual alarm? What if that still small voice you've been dismissing was the siren that saved your life? Angels don't just warn, they remove. Some people didn't leave because you were flawed. They left because they were never assigned to your future. When their presence threatens your purpose, your angels act. And though it may hurt, some exits are holy. Some goodbyes are wrapped in mercy. Some losses were heaven's way of pulling you out of a trap. So why do you still mourn what heaven has already released? Why do you knock on doors your spirit has closed? Why do you confuse isolation with abandonment when it's often divine insulation? Why do you grieve the silence? When it brought clarity, why do you still question what your soul already knows? Your angels have been busy shielding you from slander, redirecting you from sabotage, whispering warnings through discomfort, confirming truth through peace, severing what could have strangled your destiny. They don't move by emotion. They move by assignment. Every delay strategy, every redirection mercy, every no sacred, and you. Chosen one, you're still standing. Another way, angels protect you. Through instinct. What the world calls gut feeling is often divine signal, encoded warnings from heaven. That sudden pause, that internal check, that strange unease. It's not fear. It's heaven intervening before your eyes can understand what your spirit already knows. Have you ever felt pulled back at the edge of a yes? Ever sensed something was wrong before it was proven? That was the whisper of the Spirit. Not loud, not dramatic, but deliberate. In Acts 16, Paul was planning to preach in Asia, but the Spirit wouldn't let him. Not through thunder or vision, but through a check in his spirit. And because he obeyed, the gospel was redirected to where heaven intended. So what if your hesitation was a rerouting? What if your delay was direction? Many chosen ones are under warfare even while they sleep. Dark dreams, sleep paralysis, pressure on your chest. You are not weak. You are not crazy. You are being opposed because your authority is rising. And yet you wake up, still standing, still here, not just surviving but carrying proof of heaven's intervention. In Zechariah 3, Satan stood accusing Joshua the high priest before God. But the Lord rebuked Satan, and angels came not only to defend but to cleanse, clothe, and commission. This wasn't metaphor. This was real. Spiritual deliverance handled while Joshua stood silently. How many of your victories have happened in moments you never even saw? Kristen Bell once shared that during a mountain hike. She felt overwhelming dread. Her companions mocked her caution, but she refused to move forward. Minutes later, a rock slide wiped out the trail. She said, "It wasn't logic, it was presence." Presence. That's what's been guiding you, even when you didn't know what to call it. And Terrell, he was about to accept a lucrative offer. Everything looked perfect, but something in his gut turned. Missed calls, strange tension, repeating numbers on clocks 4:44. Everywhere. What looked like opportunity was actually opposition dressed in disguise. Despite the prestige, despite the salary, Tyrell declined the offer. Something in his spirit said no. 2 months later, the company was exposed in a scandal so wide it would have buried his name in shame. What he thought was an open door was a setup. What felt like loss became his covering. What seemed like a delay was deliverance. Are you paying attention to the signals, to the numbers, to the nudges that keep circling your choices? Heaven is not silent. It's strategic. In the animal kingdom, Elephants return for years to the bones of their dead. They pause, they touch, they mourn, not out of instinct but memory, out of reverence for what was. And just like them, your angels remember. They know what your family carried. They know the pain in your lineage, the shame that's been passed down like inheritance, and they've been assigned to make sure the cycles that broke others end with you. This is why you never quite fit in, why you asked questions no one else had language for, why you felt different in rooms that called you family. That wasn't rebellion. That was revelation. Heaven marked you to be the interruption, the curse breaker, the cycle ender. So why do you keep silencing your discernment just to make others comfortable? Why do you ignore the dreams that keep returning night after night? Why do you apologize for sensing what others can't? You are not paranoid. You are prophetic. You are not overreacting. You are being redirected. You are not imagining the signs. You are finally hearing them. Your angels are not passive. They are warriors, relentless, assigned, and prepared to tear down strongholds that outlived your ancestors. Some of the battles you've been fighting didn't start with you, but they will end with you. Addiction, poverty, abandonment, shame, silence. These spirits traveled through generations, but they've met resistance now. They've met you. You've always been the one who felt too deeply, who asked too much, who couldn't ignore what others accepted. That's not dysfunction. That's assignment. Moses didn't look like a deliverer. He was born under genocide, hidden in a basket, raised by the enemy but led an entire nation to freedom. Your pain was never personal. It was prophetic. And yet warfare leaves marks. You may not bleed, but your soul limps. You've wondered how you're still standing, and still somehow peace finds you in moments it shouldn't. You wake up lighter after weeping. Hope returns without warning. That's not random. That's restoration. That's angelic activity moving beyond what your eyes can see. Matthew 4:11. After Jesus resisted the devil in the wilderness, it says, "Then the angels came and ministered to him. Even the Son of God needed restoration. So do you, and heaven has already assigned it." C.C. Winans once shared that during a season of deep burnout, she'd feel strength come over her right before stepping on stage. Strength she knew didn't come from food or sleep. It was the Spirit, she said, because I had nothing left but something lifted me. That wasn't adrenaline. That was anointing. Mikal, a nurse in a chaotic ER, began noticing that when she was on shift, critical patients often stabilized, not just survived, stabilized. One night, a colleague told her, "People don't just live around you, they recover." That night, Mikal prayed and felt a presence so real. She wept. She realized she didn't just carry skill, she carried protection. Could it be the same for you? Could your presence be covering others? Could your prayers be shifting rooms without anyone knowing it? The albatross can fly thousands of miles without flapping its wings. It rides the wind, saving energy while covering oceans. And you are being carried more than you realize. You've been lifted by a current you can't explain. That's not strength from this world. That's supernatural endurance. So why do you still doubt your resilience? Why do you assume your exhaustion means weakness? When you've been carrying legacies, why do you apologize for your depth? When your depth is your assignment? Why do you diminish your discernment when it's what's been keeping you and others safe? You don't just sense atmospheres, you shift them. So stop pretending you're fine when you've been called to command help. Stop hesitating to believe in your angels when their fingerprints are all over your life. If your soul is burning with this truth, say it out loud. I am covered. I am rising. I am not alone. Type 444 in the comments, not for attention, but as alignment, a spiritual signal, a heaven-backed decree, because yes, your angels are fighting for you. Yes, this is warfare, but no, you are not losing, you are leading. But here is the sacred responsibility: you must do your part. Divine assistance works best through divine alignment. You must stay in position, stay clean, stay discerning, stay surrendered. Heaven will never fail you, but it cannot partner with what you refuse to release. Protection doesn't just happen. It's activated by obedience. The enemy doesn't always barge through the front door. Sometimes he slips through cracks, through unchecked thoughts, unchallenged emotions, unnoticed moments of weariness. He doesn't need a storm. He just needs silence. That's why your protection must not be seasonal. It must be constant. Have you noticed how the attacks escalate when your prayer life declines, how dreams shift when your spirit grows quiet, how confusion creeps in the longer you delay discipline? The enemy doesn't need open doors, just unlocked windows. But here's your good news: you are not helpless. You have authority, and when you use it, heaven moves. Prayer is not a last resort. It's a first strike, a shield, a sword, a summons, not begging, declaring, not pleading, commanding in alignment with the will of God. In Acts 12, Peter was imprisoned not by plot, but by purpose. And what saved him wasn't planning. It was prayer. The church was earnestly praying for him. And that night, an angel broke his chains. Do you believe your prayers can shift realms like that? Have you noticed that when you stop speaking, confusion speaks louder, that anxiety multiplies in the silence where declaration used to live? Could it be your voice has always been the threat? Spiritual discipline isn't just about prayer, it's also about energy hygiene. Chosen ones are often empathic. You feel rooms, you absorb emotion, you carry what's not yours. But if you don't cleanse, you become a container for contamination. That weight you feel, that fatigue that has no explanation, that might not be yours. That might be what you've carried for others. This is not your imagination. This is spiritual overload. You're not overreacting. You're overexposed. Like a priest entering the ancient temple, you've crossed thresholds carrying residue, not filth, but frequency. In the Old Testament, the priest's washing wasn't about dirt. It was about alignment. Purity was not for performance. It was preparation for presence. And you, chosen one, must cleanse, not just your body, but your atmosphere, not just your space, but your energy. Whether it's through fasting, salt baths, anointing oil, burning sage, praying aloud, or declaring scripture in the air, it is not the ritual, but the intention that realigns your frequency with heaven's. This is not superstition. This is spiritual hygiene. Author and former Navy SEAL David Goggins teaches that most people quit at 40% of their true capacity. Though not speaking from the pulpit, his words echo truth. Discipline reveals dimensions. Could it be that your spiritual protection has been limited, not by God's absence, but by your own inconsistency? When Emmanuel moved into a new apartment, exhaustion clung to him like smoke even after sleep. At first, he blamed stress, but then he remembered the dream. Someone standing silently in the corner of his room, watching, unmoving. He began praying aloud nightly, anointing his walls, playing scripture as he slept. Within days, the heaviness lifted. The enemy had slipped in unnoticed, but it could not stay where heaven was enthroned. What's lingering in your atmosphere? What spirits have been allowed to squat because no one declared them evicted? Look at nature. Bees do not defend their hive by sight, they detect invaders by vibration. Anything that doesn't resonate gets denied entry. You, too, must discern by resonance. Not everyone who smiles is safe. Not every familiar face deserves access to your spirit. Your gate must be guarded not by paranoia but by peace. Have you ever left a conversation feeling suddenly anxious, confused, or drained, even though nothing seemed wrong? That wasn't chemistry. That was spiritual clash. And Jesus never apologized for protecting his peace. When he went to raise Jairus' daughter, he didn't perform the miracle until every doubter was put out. Mark 5:40. Your resurrection season requires a cleansed room. Not everyone can walk into your holy place. Not everyone deserves access to your inner court, because your spirit isn't public space, it's consecrated ground, and you must speak. Your voice has power in the realm of spirit before your feet hit the floor in the morning. Let the atmosphere know I am covered. I am chosen. No weapon formed against me shall prosper. I am shielded by heaven's hosts. So why do you hesitate to pray with authority? Why do you cleanse only after the heaviness crushes you? Why do you allow entry to people your spirit is already grieving? Why do you wait for collapse before building boundaries? Why do you keep apologizing for protecting your peace? The enemy is subtle. He doesn't always break in with noise. Sometimes he seeps in softly through a song, a conversation, a screen. Not every battle starts with a sword. Some begin with a scene, a lyric, a reel you watched too long, and then your spirit grew dull. Have you noticed how your mood shifts after binge-watching shows soaked in chaos and lust? How your focus drifts after spending hours scrolling past shadows disguised as entertainment? Have you felt your peace grow brittle after entertaining conversations rooted in gossip and apathy? That's not just overstimulation, it's spiritual interference. Romans 12:2 declares, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." Because your mind isn't just memory, it's a battlefield, and what you feed it will determine whether you fight or fall. Daniel knew this. When the king offered him delicacies from the palace, Daniel refused not because it was bad food, but because it would defile his clarity. He chose vegetables and water, not to diet but to discern, and in return, he received visions no one else could access. Daniel 1. Could it be your next level of discernment is being blocked by what you consume? Even Tyler Perry shared that in his early days. He didn't just battle poverty, he battled the voices trying to redefine him. Toxic voices, repeating patterns, cycles he had to starve in order to rise. So, chosen one, what are you still feeding that's weakening your shield? What conversation is too comfortable? What playlist keeps piercing your peace? What harmless habits are actually soft altars inviting darkness in? Why do you speak affirmations timidly when your angels respond to authority? Speak boldly. Cleanse consistently. Pray actively. Protect fiercely and repeat, because the enemy doesn't sleep, but neither does heaven. And now it's your turn to rise in vigilance, not fear, to guard your gates with wisdom, not suspicion, to be spiritually clean, emotionally clear, and mentally centered. If this speaks to you, if your soul is on fire, don't brush it off. Let heaven hear your response. Type 555 in the comments. Not as performance, but as a spiritual positioning. Say aloud, I am disciplined, I am protected, I am aligned. Because this is more than cleansing. This is consecration, and you, chosen one, are entering your next level, not with noise, but with authority. You were never meant to feed on chaos, but somewhere along the way, distraction disguised itself as normal. You began your days with noise-trending headlines, songs soaked in lust, memes laced with sarcasm. You didn't think much of it until your dreams darkened, your thoughts grew heavy, and your sense of self began to slip. But this wasn't coincidence. It was contamination. And your spirit, though quiet, was begging to be cleansed. Then came the shift. Worship replaced worry. A psalm replaced panic. Stillness returned, and the heavens opened again. What you fed began to change what you carried. The eagle does not eat decay. Unlike vultures, it refuses what is dead, spoiled, stagnant. Because of this, it soars higher, lives longer, and sees farther than any other bird. That's not biology, it's revelation. You cannot fly while feeding on what poisons your vision. You cannot soar while digesting what numbs your discernment. What you consume is what you become, and the spiritual weight you carry is directly tied to the diet you choose. Alignment is not just a nice idea, it's your survival. The further you drift from your divine assignment, the more fragile your protection becomes. Jonah didn't face the storm because he was evil, but because he was in the wrong place, and his misalignment brought turbulence not just to himself but to everyone around him. Could your unrest be the result of staying where God never sent you? Could the storm be heaven's attempt to reroute you before it's too late? The enemy doesn't always come through chaos. Sometimes he comes through comfort. Not all open doors are invitations. Not all connections are covenant. Have you been excusing compromise in the name of potential? Have you stayed in relationships that offer attention but rob you of clarity? That is not partnership. That is sabotage in slow motion. And the longer you entertain misalignment, the louder confusion will grow. Fasting is not deprivation. It is declaration. It is saying, I want presence more than pleasure. Jesus fasted not to impress heaven, but to silence the noise of the flesh. When the enemy came, Jesus didn't panic. He spoke, not from weakness, but from spiritual muscle built in solitude. You don't fast to escape pain. You fast to access power. And in that space of hunger, you become clear again, anchored again, unshakable again. So why do you hesitate to disconnect from what drains you? Why do you delay obedience when your spirit already knows the answer? Why do you ask for protection while walking in directions that heaven never endorsed? Why do you seek discernment but silence the voice of unease that rises within? You are not waiting on clarity. Clarity is waiting on your surrender. Every moment you choose discipline over distraction, your authority sharpens. Every time you push back from the table, silence the screen, pause the playlist, and lean into the spirit. You reclaim ground the enemy tried to steal. This isn't about legalism. This is about alignment. This is about accessing your full power, untainted and unafraid. And when the noise finally quiets, when your soul begins to detox, when your ears tune to the frequency of heaven again, you will see it. The veil will lift. The path will clear. The angels will move, not because they were never there, but because you finally came into agreement with the holy rhythm they've been guarding since the beginning. If this word resonates deep in your chest, don't scroll past it. Declare it. Let your agreement be audible. Say it aloud, I will feed what's divine. I will protect my peace. I will align without delay. And if your spirit bears witness, type 606 in the comments, not as a number of fear, but as a bold flipping of the counterfeit, a divine refusal to be deceived. Say it again. Like thunder in the unseen, I align. I ascend. I am awake. You are not just fasting. You are summoning the unseen. With every denied craving, every whispered prayer in the hunger, you are shifting dimensions. Jesus said, this kind does not go out except by prayer and fasting. And that wasn't poetry, it was strategy. There are battles in your life that will not break until your spirit grows louder than your appetite, until your obedience outshouts your impulse. Fasting is not punishment, it is weaponized alignment. And afterward, you don't just feel lighter, you feel stronger. Your spirit stands taller. That is divine reinforcement arriving on assignment. But power isn't built only in denial. It multiplies in gratitude. Have you stopped today not to complain, not to plead, but to say thank you? Have you ever paused to whisper, thank you? Divine protectors, thank you for standing guard while I slept. Thank you for whispering peace when I deserved panic. Your thankfulness is not weakness, it is alignment. It honors what most overlook, and heaven responds to honor. Angels move more freely, more fiercely, when they are acknowledged, when you walk in holy awareness that you are not surviving by chance, but by constant covering. Dr. Edith Eger, a soul who endured Auschwitz as a teenager, knew this truth in her marrow. She fed her mind with light, even while death crouched at every corner. And she survived not just physically, but spiritually whole. She told her patients, "The prison is in your mind. The key is in your pocket. That is your inheritance too. When you choose to rise each day with discipline, prayer, gratitude, and silence. You are building an armor hell cannot penetrate. Your faith is not passive. It is a fortress. Fear leaves doors cracked open, but faith seals them shut with fire. When you believe not in theory, but in trembling certainty, you activate the highest realms." Hebrews 1:14 says that angels are ministering spirits, sent to serve those who will inherit salvation. They do not move for panic. They move for belief, not ego, but unshakable spiritual posture. You are not walking alone. Your breath may be solitary, but your footsteps are thundered with heavenly reinforcements. There will be seasons when no sign appears. No voice speaks back. But the silence is not abandonment. It is the proving ground of trust. Have you walked into chaos but felt stillness settle in your bones? That was not accident. That was invisible armor wrapping around your soul. Your roar may be silent, but in the spirit realm, your name echoes like fire. You carry territory. You are not just protected, you are feared in the unseen. Fasting quiets the flesh. Gratitude tunes your access. Faith seals your covering. And still, others wonder how you're still standing. They don't see the warfare. They don't see the weeping, but they sense your strength and mistake it for luck. They do not realize the demons that stalked your footsteps fell at the gate of angelic fire. And chosen one, if you're still reading this, if your heart is burning with the fire of recognition, it's because this was written for you. This is not coincidence. This is your confirmation. You weren't broken. You were being built. You weren't rejected. You were being refined. The enemy thought they could silence you, but they didn't know that silence is where you hear God clearest. That darkness is where your light grows brightest. Every tear you cried alone. Every night the weight sat on your chest. Every moment you almost gave up, heaven documented it. Your survival is the signature of angels at work. So walk like it. Talk like it. Pray like it. You are not a victim of your season. You are the storm sent to interrupt it. You are not random. You are required. You are not abandoned. You are surrounded. You are not weak. You are chosen. So declare it. If your soul bore witness, type 777 in the comments, not for show, but as a spiritual summons. Let your agreement be public. Let the unseen realm know I believe. I align. I rise. And if this message sparked something sacred in you, share it. Send it. Let the algorithm be a doorway to someone else's awakening. This is not content. This is calling. And you are part of a rising remnant that refuses to sleep through the sacred. So rise with fire in your eyes and armor on your spirit. The angels are already moving. Walk like one of them walks beside you, because one does. In Jesus' name, amen.